right, and I have finally put into words. I think this should be one of our greatest discoveries. Um, because what I realized is basically space is more powerful and it holds more keys than people think. And I think that's what the Large Hadron Collider was trying to discover. And I realized what they were trying to discover with it. And then I realized, oh my gosh, um, what they're gonna realize at some point in the future is that space itself is like a substance. It's almost like water. So there's infinite amounts of this substance. Okay, so even though it doesn't appear to have any sort of construct, it's actually the building blocks. It's the only way anything even exists because everything is stored inside of space. Okay? So it's basically like a storage facility. But nobody can see it because it's invisible and you can move through it. But that's because it's like a simulation. It's like a computer. And that's how it can store information and memory out of thin air, which it looks like it's nothing, but it's storage, it's memory. So that's why whenever if you keep zooming in, zooming in, zooming in, zooming in, you'll always reach a point where nothing's there and then everyone's confused. What is going on? Because 99.99999% of everything, as far as I believe that's the ratio, and if it's not that ratio, it's something around that. It's like 98 or something. It's nothing. It's information. It's literally just so the only way for anything to exist is if we can process anything. So that is the only way anything even is able to exist is because we are in a simulation, okay? Like a computer system. Okay, so it's our brain that processes anything. So we rely on the simple fact that we have to be able to process anything and everything. And on top of us relying on needing to process everything, which is what the brain is for, it's um we need something that's going to process everything, which is what nobody can see because it has to always be there. And then when it's always there, you don't really notice it. It's kind of like space. Like it just always keeps going, and nobody really notices how big it is because it just you when it just keeps doing the same thing, you kind of just take it for granted. So, so the processor had to have always been in operation. So you need both the yin and the yang. You always need both sides. So first of all, we need a processor, and we need something. We need what is it? Wait, why can I not? Why am I mixing this up? We need for there to be a processor, and we need to be able to process. So it's two different things. So everything is inside the processor inside of space. So when everything is inside of space, that's inside the processor because it's inside the memory. That's what we conclude from what we've observed and noticed. So space itself is storage, memory. Okay, and that's why when everyone starts looking at it, we realize it's everything and everywhere. Because if you keep zooming in, you'll realize, oh my gosh, it's just being stored. It's storage. Because that's how God, that's God. We're in luck because that's the only way for anything to exist. This gets a little bit religious, but from what I've discovered, you know, his nature is to be like a supercomputer robot, like that's his language. He knows code. Like he can he can probably write one line of code larger than the size of the fucking galaxy, and then make your fucking head spin by looking at like all the complexity of because that's his nature. He can simulate and create anything, and that's how he creates anything is through the processor, through that language, through that storage, through because it gets written into the memory. He's the one who controls over that process, but he had to make sure that mankind starts respecting that nature, because there's no limit. He can simulate and let anything and allow for anything to exist, but is so he knows every angle that he needs it to all be realistic. So, for example, if something he isn't supposed to be going on, for example, like if a fucking if the sun blows up, how is anything going to just keep going on the way it was going on if it's not going on the way it was going on? So mankind likes to ignore that principle and aspect that, oh, if I go blow up somebody off the face of the map, that it doesn't matter, that it didn't erase nothing, that it's not going to change anything, that it doesn't matter. But God is trying to reveal, like, okay, well, when I make sure that everything is realistic, and then it's going to remember what is being done. Now, no one can start arguing that nobody gives a shit about the simple fact of, oh, let's go destroy things, just for the simple fact that we know it's a computer simulation and it's stored in memory. And he can just basically give us a planet to blow up, and then say, oh, yeah, give us another planet. Let's blow another planet up for our own fun, which there's no. He could do that if it's far enough outside of the distance to where it isn't going to change or affect anything negatively, and then if it's safe, yeah, we can go do that, like, for fun. But of course, we're gonna need to have his presence to go doing that type of shit, because he's the only one who has that sort of power. But that's how he operates. He's like, yeah, sure. If you guys want to do anything, I'm gonna be the only one who's gonna be able to be capable of doing anything that you guys are gonna want to see. So it's like I was giving an example. It's like there's gonna always be a scale where it's gonna always reach over to that level where it would only have to go. It goes down to his capabilities, and it's outside of your limits, because you don't have control over the operation, the process, the computer, the simulation, which only God himself, because he's the one who defines what's realistic. Well, he created what's realistic because he has infinite amounts of experience to justify his reasoning and argument behind, oh, this is what's realistic. So that's why when you're seeing everything created out of nothing, it's that point of expectation where something is never expected to be possible, which is why you see this huge miracle, because it's so improbabilistic and impossible for any of the event to occur, but then out of nowhere it's shattered to the core, because it's the yin and the yang. It's either A or B. It's either going to happen or not going to happen. And if it is going to happen, it's going to be like no one could ever imagine. So so space is storage. It's memory. So if you zoom into your body, let's say your hand, You just keep zooming in, zooming in, zooming in. You'll notice that it's all empty space. Because you're just stored within reality. It's memory. It's all memory. It's all storage. Okay, so the way the storage system operates, because it's under operation, it's a computer system. It could be endless to have no end, to mean you could be endless to have no end, but that isn't realistic at the moment because it's not safe. So for God, that's what he defines as to be realistic. So the only thing he's going to okay and verify to be realistic is if he's supervising. That's the only realistic thing he foresees. All right, and then he doesn't have nothing. If he has nothing to do with anything, then he isn't gonna allow for anything to go on. Because without him, if circumstances were different, it would be different. But it's not realistic because are in danger without him, and that's why he has to create for the operation and the simulation to die, because it's for the protection and safety of life itself, for things to be at peace, be at rest. That's why they always say rest in peace, because you know most people at a time later on in their life, they reach that point of suffering, and then they just need that rest, which is realistic, because those circumstances can occur, especially when God is not involved. God's not involved. We deal with these huge problems where things are going on where it needs to be put to rest and it just needs to end, right? And he knows that. He knows, based off knowing how to simulate infinite amounts of simulation of what's going to happen in free will. So he's not invading your privacy, because you can't change the fact that he already knows everything. So just because he knows what you're going to do doesn't make him reliable for your actions, for him knowing, because that's your own business. That's what the way he designed it. And everybody gets confused with that, and then they get wrapped up in the whole concept, well, if he knows, then he's the one who's responsible since he knew. Why does that sound so familiar? Because it's holographic in nature. So you're stating that somebody else knew, but why can't you look at your own self? Why didn't you know? And why do you think that's the approach that God operates with? And he's like, "Oh, I'm supposed to know? Aren't you? Why aren't you supposed to know?" And that's as realistic as it gets when it comes down to dealing with your own business. And that's the problem when everybody wants God to leave everything alone, is it's not safe, because he's not there. He can't re-energize the memory. He can't breathe life into the universe if he can't do anything else, because it's based off his knowledge, what he feels to be safe. He doesn't feel safe letting it go on. Okay? Had he have been able to leave everything to just go on, then it would have been safe and it would have been a different story. But the problem is it's never safe. And it was always going to reach that point, no matter what angle you ever got to, where it is not safe, because it's basically a challenge. Okay, so my argument is space itself, once the creator taps into that storage, that memory, and he knows that everybody has changed their mind, because that's the whole purpose of everybody learning their lesson of, learning, oh, well, we don't want it like this when we know that it's going to have to be like that. That's the whole reason of why everybody had to see it, because everyone wanted to argue, and go against it. Oh, we can make it work. We can. And then it reaches a point where, fine, everybody thinks it's going to work, but you guys need to see why it's not going to work. And now we see why it's not going to work. Without God, without somebody who can straighten everything out, without somebody here who can keep everything alive, He's the reason everything is even created. See, that's what would happen if God comes around. If He comes around, see, that's why He wants everybody to get it out of their system, get it out of their operation, because it's based on free will. If everybody changes their mind and says, hey, you know what, we've changed our mind, we don't want to operate like this. That's the whole purpose of allowing for it to get bad, is because that's where things are going to change. We don't want to go in our daily routine through this operation, because it's not the best way that it can be. So now when everybody changes their mind and goes against, sin, destruction, when He's creating everything, don't go killing people, putting people into debt, creating war, needing your own privacy for war. And that's the dumbest thing about us getting our own privacy, is we want our own privacy just for war. Okay? If it wasn't for the simple fact that we didn't want to go waging war, things wouldn't be the way they are. So now he's letting everybody realize how war doesn't serve a purpose if the simulation allows for infinite amount. So it doesn't matter that things are getting scarce, because even if it were infinite, you're still going to have these wars for no reason, no purpose. So people can argue, oh yeah, well, it's because of everything's getting scarce. They can say that, but the truth is no matter what, when you just get enough people around each other, it's just gonna turn into a war, straight up, unless somebody can talk some sense into everybody from destroying everybody. So it was always going to reach that crescendo, and it would have been worse. Could you imagine we have 20 galaxies full of quadrillions of billions of people, and all of a sudden everyone goes into a goddamn war? And you wonder why God needs to make sure that it remains at a small scale, so that we can so we can stop this shit from happening. Why do you think He had to slow it down, so that everybody sees what happens and notices it? Because if you slow things down, it's a form of meditation to where you can see it and notice it. See, that type of shit normally just goes so quickly that there's no stopping it. It just fucking blows up and it's gone, and there's no stopping it. So He had to fucking make it on a small scale to make sure everyone's like, okay, does everybody agree that we are not going to be blowing each other up? Because why? Because anybody can blow anybody up. It's not hard. All anybody has to do is launch one bomb, and anybody can blow up anything they want. So that's why it's a matter of free will if anybody decides or chooses to do that type of shit. And then that's where we gotta say, hey, I'm not gonna go blowing up Earth. And that's where it leads to. You lead to planetary wars, and then all of a sudden you got Earth getting blown up, and then you got Earth 4 blowing up, Earth 6 blowing up, Earth 9 blowing up, Earth 6, and then you got the last man standing, and then God is sitting there furious because he's infinite, all powerful. There's no reason for anybody to go destroying each other, fighting each other. Then all of a sudden, half the galaxy gets blown up. And then everyone wonders why we have to go through this simulation to learn. It's a training simulation. It's because once we finish our training, then we can go to the next because space itself, it's one large space. It's like one level, but the system operates in a way where that's where everyone was so confused about a multiverse, where he could load infinite amounts of galaxies in in space itself, because he controls the system. So there's, in theory, infinite amounts of galaxies, but they don't exist until he actually creates it. So we don't know what all he created until we discover it and we see it. So we just got to keep looking at it. What did he make, and what did he not make? Because space is infinite, and we're in this one space, one storage. But remember, God Himself does have access to infinite amounts of levels of those storages, which is like a hard drive. So it could just be like file 1, file 2, which is just two different universes, just because it's two different files, and they're both equal because they're both, each file's infinite because He can create infinite amounts of infinite files, right? So, so yeah, He can create, but He likes things to be realistic, so He doesn't like for things to be all chaotic. So He puts it in, He organizes it, because that's His job. That's what He knows how to do. So this is where He's like, okay, this is where we're gonna start off, where everyone's gonna learn that we are a civilization where we don't need to fight each other and go to war, because everything is a computer simulation. There's no, everything is infinite. Okay, why would we need to go even begin to make things worse and worse and worse and worse and worse, and punish somebody, for example? And that's the problem, where He's like, oh no, there is no way I'm gonna be letting you people you know go on terroristic rampages, which is what the simulation allows. It allows for anybody to do whatever they want if anybody chooses to do it. And what happens? People decide, oh, well, I want to go rob a bank. Well, the creator knows, well, you know what? That's their free right. That's their choice. They want to go do that. The only thing that's ever going to stop these type of things from happening is if everybody learns, like, that's stupid. Why would anybody ever want to do that? So that's why it's a training simulation where everyone's going to learn, because that's what Judgment Day is. He's going to say, okay, on your training, this is what you need to learn because you weren't able to. And remember, he's lenient. So the main things we're looking for is when you are destructive and you are actually harming anyone or something, you know. So if somebody, we're saying, for a good example, not to point fingers, but like serial killers are the ones where He's gonna say, okay, well, since you seem to not understand the reality behind these actions, you're going to need to learn. And He's going to train and straighten everybody out, like, okay, once I train everybody, and straighten everybody out based off what they need to learn, because everybody's different. Everybody needs to learn different things. So what happens is that's what hell is he puts everybody through hell, so you eventually do make it through, because it's base E equals MC square. I mean, he could put you through hell for forever if there's a balance to the equation, if there's some sort of reason or a purpose, and it's based on if you did something wrong bad enough. So it would have to be infinite. You would have, is like, I argue one of the only people that would is going to, some of the main people that are going to have to worry about infinite amounts of punishment are like Lucifer, because Lucifer's the one starting the argument of give us our own space, leave us alone, and that we won't start wars and we won't destroy everything. And then there he goes behind everybody's back. He's going all out war. He's starting all out war. Why do you think he's starting all out war? Because he already knows the simulations. He already knew. Oh God, he knows that if there were infinite civilizations of all these planets of man, that there would be all-out war at some point, and that's why it has to start here. So he's against that. He's like, he wants all-out war, because he feels like, oh, well, if we go to all-out war, I'll be the last one standing, because I'm the all-superior. Why do you think Lucifer's always trying to run around saying he's God? Because he's like, oh, I can destroy everybody, everything. God made him more powerful than everybody else. So then, dude, he's all fucking power tripping, just because he knows about the simulation and the computer system and how it operates. So he's all trying to hijack it. It's almost like he's trying to fucking seize it, but the creator knew that this was going to happen, and he's like, well, first of all, no one can seize the universe or hijack the operation, or no one can tap into, no one can hack his computer, because dude, he's all powerful. So anyway, you're basically looking at Lucifer trying to put a virus on the creator's software, and the creator detected it and he knew about it. And now he's dismantling and destroying the virus. Because that's the first thing everyone has to learn, is like, first of all, if it comes down to a whole principle of war, don't even get him started. Okay, so if everyone wants to go to war, what's stopping God from being the one that destroys everything? Because we know that he can destroy everything. So why is everybody so infatuated with just putting him on the sideline? Just don't do nothing, even though you can destroy everything. Okay, that's not realistic. When you got this guy over here who can drop bombs over Baghdad, and you're telling him don't go drop bombs over Baghdad, so then you can go drop bombs over Baghdad. That's not realistic, and that's what he's trying to reveal. He's not having it. He's like, you know what? If it comes down to war, I'm gonna be the last one standing, and I'm gonna be the one who blows everything up. And there's no way, ands, ifs, or buts around it. So you guys are gonna learn first things first that war is not what anybody's wants. Because if it comes down to war, you're done. You won't exist. There's no warfare tactic that can even begin to challenge the creator. So it's a joke. It's an absolute joke. That's what he's trying to reveal. He's like, it's an absolute joke when anybody is going to try to come talk and try to start a war with me. How you going to come start a war with God when you guys know he can blow everything up in the blink of a fucking eyeball? I mean, And that's where everyone's got to tap out. What do you think he's doing? He's got everybody in the ring, and he's like, I want to see how long you can stand in the arena versus me before I make you tap out. Because guess what? If you guys want to go waging war, I'm going to be the last one standing, tapping everybody out. And now what's happening? Everyone's sitting there tapping out, and he's fucking beating the shit out of everybody because he's not having it. Because he needs to make sure everybody's like, I give up. I don't want war because I realize this is stupid and there's no chance at all. And that's all he's trying to reveal. So all he's doing is he's just pinning you just a little bit harder and a little bit harder and a little bit harder and a little bit harder until you finally realize, like, this is too uncomfortable, dude. He's too strong. I can't do anything. And then you tap out. All he's waiting, he is waiting for everybody to tap out. Because once everybody learns, like, okay, does everybody realize what's going on here? That if anybody gets in the ring with me, you're all going down. And now everybody's learning that that's realistic. He's not going to stand there and let you beat the shit out of him or anybody else. That's just being realistic. That's over his dead body. Alright, if he didn't exist, sure, do whatever the fuck you want. But as long as he exists, ain't nobody going to go running around beating the shit out of each other. Because that's what's going to happen. Anybody wants to go running around beating the shit out of each other, what's going to happen? He's going to throw you in the ring, and he's going to pin your ass until you tap out. Until you say, I give up. I cannot handle this. You're too fucking strong. It's a joke. And that's what he's trying to make sure everybody realizes. Are you realizing it's a joke? It's suicide. It is a death trap to fight God. It's stupid. It's pointless. It's not going to solve anything. Because he can rule over you. He can do anything he wants to you, dude. It's a joke. Do you understand that if he wanted to throw you, realistically speaking, he could throw you in a fucking ocean 1 mile under the ocean for fucking 100 billion years if that's what he wants to do. And how are you going to stop him from doing that? Now do you see why it's stupid to go try to start a fight with him? You know, you're going to go try to tell him not to fight, but you're going to go fighting. That's where he doesn't let people do it. If anybody wants to go fighting anybody, you're going to have to fight him. And nobody can beat him. And Lucifer is trying to fight him. And you've seen what happened to Lucifer. Lucifer got straightened out. God straightened him out. God threw him in the shark tank and beat his ass. Because he's not having it. He's not dealing with troublemakers. If you're a troublemaker, you know, he's not having it. You know, there's two different types of those versions. You can be a troublemaker and you can be a thrill seeker, and still it's two different things. You can still be a thrill seeker and you don't have to be destructive, okay? That's what he's trying to explain and teach everybody. So anyway, if you guys keep going, if you guys keep stepping in the ring with him and trying to prove your point, it's useless. It serves no purpose. Because you're trying to prove a point that he doesn't agree with, period. He don't agree with it. Because it's your word versus his word. You're saying it's okay to fucking do whatever the fuck we want and to fucking beat people up and to fight. So if you're okay with that, then you're basically okay with him just fucking drowning you in the middle of the ocean 1 mile under the fucking water for fucking 10 billion years. That's stupid. That's a joke. It's a joke. So you're not cool with it. None of you people are cool with fucking starting fights and wars. Because that's what it comes down to. If you guys are cool with starting wars and fucking people over and not giving a shit, then you obviously don't give a fuck that he can just fuck you over. And that's what he's gonna straighten everybody's asses out with when he judges you. He's gonna say, you know what? It's time you learn your lesson. And you know what? You're not God, and now it's time for you to learn how big of a bite did you bite off. You know, don't go eating more than you can eat. Don't put more on your plate than you can eat. Cause he's loving it. He's loving it. He's loving it because he knows that the stupider somebody is, the quicker they're gonna change. That's why he's letting it happen. That's why he doesn't give a fuck. He's like, oh, I cannot wait to surprise them. And that's what this is all about. It's a surprise. He's been waiting to surprise everybody that, hey, guys, yeah, of course, we do have eternal life. Surprise. But first things first, everyone needs to be trained on how this shit operates and how we operate. So he's loving it. He's loving fucking Johnny running around Texas Chainsaw Massacre and dumb fuck. Because he's like, okay, that's how much you want to bite off? All right, take a seat and I'll get with you here in a minute. What do you think's going to happen to Johnny on Judgment Day? When he's like, okay, well, I know everything that happened because I know everything. So we can't change that. Okay, now what are we going to do about this? You're running around Texas Chainsaw massacring all these people for no reason, no purpose, not even any self-defense. No self-defense whatsoever. And that's one of your biggest defenses that you can use on Judgment Day. Is you can say, hey, I self-defense. In my self-defense, I protected my life. And if you cannot use that in your defense, in your argument, you better believe he's going to start training your ass and putting you through hell. And we don't know. Because it's relative to everybody's how much each person has done. Because he knows how to get it down to the exact threshold of this is how much you owe. So I'm just warned, and why do you think I put it in vivid detail? Is because I'm making sure that there isn't misconception. Because this works in good and bad. Because if I teach people this, and then you know it, and then you go ignoring it, you're going to get in more trouble, and that's my job. I want you to get in as much trouble, because we don't want this to go on. We don't need this shit. So I'm trying to get everybody in trouble that is being ignorant, who isn't learning, who isn't being trained. If you didn't learn anything off me training you on this, then it's not my problem. I have no control over what you learn or don't learn, or what you believe or don't believe, or what you make sense of or don't make sense of. So my job is to just throw it out there like, hey guys, you guys may just want to take it into consideration and maybe think about this, because from what I've discovered, this is what I've come to understand. So that's up for your understandings. Does it make sense? Does it make sense that it's smart not to be destructive? Well, let's use some examples. What are some examples of not being destructive? Let's say that, okay, some examples of not being destructive, some ones that really stand out. Let's say that I take a knife and I just jam it into my hand all the way through. So that's an example of not being destructive. So we do, for the most part, except for some of those individuals, it does happen that for whatever reason they decide, I'm going to stab a knife through my hand. But it's not common, and it's not normal, and it's not very realistic. And that's the main thing about it. It's not realistic. It's not realistic that somebody just says, "Oh, I'm going to jab a fucking knife through my fucking hand." Because that ties into, oh, it doesn't make sense to be destructive. That ties into being destructive. That's a form of being destructive. That's one way to be destructive. So for the most part, most people are against that. Oh, I wouldn't stab a knife through my hand, but at the same time, they go out and they go rob a bank. That doesn't make any sense. So you yourself won't just stab a knife through your hand because it's not very realistic, but all of a sudden it's realistic that you're going to go robbing a bank. And that's where God is like, okay, let them learn their lesson. Let them, because it's based on free will. It is when everybody, it's more beneficial that nobody operates under that circumstance or conduct based on, oh, we've decided that. We've changed our mind. We've learned our lesson. So once it's fused and everything changes and everyone's like, fuck this, it serves no purpose, it's a joke, then we can go into metamorphosis, the next stage, where everything shifts and transforms, transcends. That's what the afterlife, that's what's in the afterlife, is transcendence. Learning your lesson, knowing the new ways of operation. If it wasn't for the simple fact that we didn't know the proper ways of operation, which is not to be destructive, and no one can take on the argument, well, we're going to die anyway, so it doesn't matter. Because that's the whole purpose of why we need to expect that it even exists, is because we know that it's going to lead there. So we conclude that God knows everything, and He's showing us the door that this is where it's going to lead. We just have to believe Him. Why do we believe Him? Because He's proven that He can make calculations accurately and make decisions that are truthful and make sense and realistic. So it's just realistic. Like, dude, this is reality. This is what we're facing. This is what you're facing. This is what we need to change. This is what we can't have.